All right, today we're going to break down one of the most famous strategy frameworks of all time, the BCG Matrix. It's a classic for a reason, designed to answer a really simple but critical question for any business. Where should you put your money? How do you sort your winners from your losers? So first, let's just set the scene a little bit. Because every single business, I don't care if it's a huge corporation or a small startup, runs into the same basic problem when it's time to talk about growth and where to invest.
I want you to imagine you're running a company, right? You've got a whole bunch of different products. How in the world do you decide which ones are worth pouring more money into, which ones are your future superstars, and which ones are, well, just dragging the whole operation down? This isn't just some textbook exercise. This is a real deal multi-million-dollar headache that managers have to deal with every single day.
To try and solve this, the Boston Consulting Group came up with this really elegant, really simple solution way back in the 1970s. People often call it the Boston Box, and you know what? It completely changed the game for how companies thought about strategy. So what is it exactly? Well, the BCG Matrix, or the Growth Share Matrix if you want to get technical, is basically a tool that lets companies map out all their different products or business units. The whole point is to get a clear picture so you can make smarter decisions about where to put your cash and your effort. It helps you figure out where to invest, where you might need to pull back, and, ultimately, how to make the most profit in the long run. The real beauty of this matrix is just how simple it is. It plots everything you sell on a simple 2x2 grid. The line going across the bottom is your relative market share. A simple way to think of that is, how big is your slice of the pie compared to your biggest competitor? Then, the line going up the side is market growth. In other words, how fast is that whole pie getting bigger? That's it, just those two things. And by plotting your products against just those two factors, you can sort everything into four very distinct and, let's be honest, very memorably named categories. And here they are. You've got stars, cash cows, question marks, and, well, what the framework calls dogs. Each one of these tells a totally different story about a product's potential and what you should probably do with it. So let's break them down one by one, starting with the most exciting one. First up, you've got your stars. These are the products that land in that top right box. They have a high market share in a market that is just growing like crazy. Now, stars are interesting because they make a lot of money, but they also use a lot of money. Think about the Apple iPhone right when it first came out. The smartphone market was absolutely exploding, and Apple had a huge piece of it. But to stay on top, they had to pour a ton of cash into research, development, and marketing. The goal with a star is to keep feeding it, keep it in that leadership spot until the market starts to cool down, and then, hopefully, your star evolves into the next category. In that next category is the cash cow. These are products that also have a high market share, but they're in a market that's already mature, one that isn't growing very fast anymore. Cash cows are kind of like the reliable, low-drama engines of a company. They don't need a ton of new investment to keep chugging along, but they generate a really steady, dependable stream of cash. So here's the key. You milk your cash cows for profits, and that money can then be used to fund your stars, and maybe take a chance on the question marks. These are sometimes called problem children, and they are the true wild cards in your portfolio. They operate in high-growth markets, but you have a pretty low market share. You know, these products are a total gamble. They could become your next big star, but there's absolutely no guarantee. A perfect modern example is Volkswagen's early push into electric cars. The EV market was growing incredibly fast, but VW had a tiny share compared to a giant like Tesla. So they faced a tough choice. Do we invest billions to try and catch up and become a star? Or do we just cut our losses? Because if you bet wrong, a question mark can easily turn into our final category. And that brings us to the last box, the dog. These are your products that have a low market share in a market that's barely growing or maybe even shrinking. Yeah, dogs usually don't make much money. Sometimes they even lose money. They're often just a drain on resources and, maybe more importantly, on management's time and attention. The classic example here is BlackBerry. They were once a leader, right? But they just couldn't keep up with the smartphone boom. They quickly became a low-share product in a saturated market. For them, the smartest move was eventually to get out of that business and free up those resources for something else. Okay, so you've sorted all your products into these four boxes. Now what? Well, the BCG Matrix isn't just about labeling things. It's a playbook for what to do next. The strategy it creates is this continuous cycle. First, you milk that extra cash from your low-maintenance cash cows. Then, you take that cash and you use it to feed your hungry stars so they can keep growing and stay on top. Next, you take a hard look at your question marks and you place some smart, strategic bets on the ones you think have a real shot at becoming the next stars. And finally, you divest from your dogs. You stop the bleeding and free up resources and attention. It's this constant balancing act, and the companies that do it well are the ones that thrive. Now, as iconic and as useful as this matrix is, let's be real, it's not perfect. It's been around for about 50 years, and a lot of people have pointed out that, the business world has gotten just a little more complicated since the 1970s. Probably the biggest knock against the matrix is that it's just too simple. I mean, is market share really the only thing that makes a product strong? Of course not. Profitability depends on a ton of other things. The model also kind of ignores how different business units can help each other out, synergies. Sometimes a so-called dog might actually be a key product that helps protect one of your cash cows. So it's a fantastic place to start a conversation, but it's definitely not a replacement for some really deep, nuanced thinking. I love this quote. One critic called the BCG Matrix the Marlon Brando of management tools. Brilliant, fated, poorly deployed, and then discredited. That really just nails its complicated legacy, doesn't it? So why are we still talking about this nearly 50-year-old tool? I think it's because, at its heart, it gives us a simple, powerful way to talk about a really complex strategic problem. It might not give you all the answers, but it forces you to ask the right questions. And in a world that changes as fast as ours, that's a skill that never, ever goes out of style.